All right.
Hey, Dr. Ricketson, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John. Good to talk to you.
Well, good to talk to you. I appreciate your time. I sure enjoyed last week.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Well, last week you discussed and taught us about how surprisingly there is a lack of teaching by Jesus on leadership. So I know this week we're going to talk about followership and wanted to ask you about that.
Right. Well, there's it is sometimes surprising when people look in the scriptures because so much has been written about Jesus on leadership. You would certainly think, well, he's every time he turned around, he tried to teach his disciples a principle. But I think what we see is that a lot of the teachings that we get from Jesus on leadership per se are extrapolated in principle from general teachings on something else, or perhaps even his lifestyle and the way he communicated and talked to other people. But with that said, then the question is, okay, so if Jesus didn't teach that much didactically about leaders per se, did he really teach that much about followers? And the honest answer is, John, that he really didn't teach that much about following either, as far as a step by step, this is how you follow. But when you look at the scriptures, he does teach us more about following than he does about leading. There's just absolutely really no question about that. In fact, when you look at how he called his disciples, it's somewhat interesting because many of us are familiar with Jesus's famous "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." That whole idea of calling his disciples. But to set that up a little bit, I think it's important for us to realize that what Jesus does as a rabbi, as a teacher, is he sort of breaks with tradition, believe it or not. Some scholars have noted that Jesus uses a different way of calling his disciples. See, in the day of Jesus, there was a particular style of rabbi that would travel around, and disciples would come up to that particular person and say, I want to follow you. And the rabbi would say, okay, well, that's fine. Just follow me. But what is interesting about Jesus is when you look in his life, even though he had people um, come and say, hey, I want to follow you. There's one example of that. Hey, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus turns to him and says, I don't know that you really want to do that.
Yes,
Because foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. In other words, it's a tough road. It's maybe tougher than you think. But what is also interesting about that is Jesus didn't accept just anybody to follow him with regard to those that he chose as his disciples. He took a different route in the fact that he specifically went to each one of these men and he gave them an imperative. And that imperative is translated in English, follow me.
wow.
Now, also in background, I think it's important for us to realize that when Jesus lived in this region of Galilee and Nazareth and all along the shores there, uh, along the Sea of Galilee, it's not uncommon for him to have walked these ways and seen these people. In fact, several of the people that he calls for his disciples are relatives of his. They are family, and maybe they've had family reunions or they've gathered together for things. And so, just trying to put a human spin on this whole idea.
Wow.
When Jesus calls these people, I'm of the firm belief that this was not the first time he'd seen them. This was not the first time he'd ever talked to them. I mean, he'd been alive for 30 years and he'd had 30 years to live and to breathe and to work and to travel and to recreate in this area and be a human being among these people. And then when he begins his ministry, he calls these same people. He goes to these people with whom he has maybe some he might have an intimate relationship with and know them well, and others maybe a cursory relationship, such as Matthew, for instance. So I know many times we're picturing Jesus walking along the road there, and there's this tax collector, Matthew. Oh, he's hated, he's despised. It could very well be that Matthew and Jesus knew each other quite well.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, think about it.
I never thought of it that way.
Think about it. I mean, he is calling these people to himself. Now, of course, this is speculation. This is not defined in the scriptures in any way, shape, or form. But neither is it denied in the scriptures, you see. So I'm just trying to take it from a human living in the region perspective, is that Jesus is walking along, and when he comes up to Matthew, yes, he knows he's despised, but, you know, it seems to be characteristics of Jesus that he would certainly talk to the despised, would he not?
Certainly.
And that these women who eventually follow him in his official ministry, they're not unknown to him. He has passed by these places where these women of the night hang out and other things like that. He's not despised them. He's not entertained them by any stretch of imagination. But at the same time, he's been Jesus to them, you know?
Definitely.
And so all his life, Jesus has been Jesus to Matthew and to each one of these guys. And so he comes up to Matthew and he says, hey, it's time for you to follow me. And what does Matthew do? He leaves what he got behind and he follows him. Now, I would love to add the miraculous and the do-do-do-do-do-do-do idea to that, but the more natural response probably is, wow, you know, Matthew's been mulling this over in his head for some time. And he knows that Jesus is on the precipice of maybe doing something here. And he's one of the guys, he's one of the few people that loves me. I mean, he does. And so what can I do? He's inviting me. And in fact, it's not even an invitation. And I think this is quite interesting for us today, is to realize that this idea of follow me is not an invitation. It is a command.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an imperative.
Seems so passive when you say that.
It's an imperative. It's an imperative. It is, you either fish or cut bait, because now's the time. You follow me or you don't follow me. End of story.
Wow.
So the command is there. And it's interesting that Jesus, the writers of the New Testament used two types of imperatives when they translated the story. The most famous of these stories is, of course, when Jesus came up to the two disciples, Peter and Andrew, and he says, okay, I'm gonna try and read it. He says, Matthew chapter 4, he says, follow me and I will make you to become fishers of men. Right? You know this backstory. These guys are fishermen by trade. Well, it makes perfect sense that he would use that metaphor and that idea and that example of saying, okay, you've been fishing your whole life for fish. Now it's time to perhaps fish for men. And by the way, let me interject this as a preacher. I love this line. He says, what's the difference between fishing for fish and fishing for men? And you may have heard it before, but I love the line. It says, when you fish for fish, you catch them when they're alive and then they die. But when you fish for men, you catch them when they're dead and they're made alive in Christ.
Oh, that'll preach. I had not heard that. That'll preach. Goodness. Well, I love it.
Yeah. So when you look at Jesus talking to these fishermen, he comes up to them and he says, I want you to follow me. And he commands them, follow me. So the Greek words here are duete opiso mu, follow me. And it's interesting that he uses this particular word because the word for come is spoken to those who labor or are heavy laden. You come after me. And those who are invited to the marriage supper are said to come. And the woman at the well is summoned to come. Come and meet Jesus. You see, that's the word that she used to invite people to him. So Jesus is using these words, and the writers of the New Testament are taking these words, and they're using them as these imperatives that follow in the same beautiful picture of Jesus commanding us to come to him.
I love that.
To come to the marriage supper is Jesus's commanding us, and in relationship to him, to come, have intimate relationships with me, be my closest associates. It's a beautiful thing. But then on the other occasions that Jesus went to his other disciples and said, come, follow me, follow me, follow me. He uses a different Greek word for those particular imperatives, and it's the Greek word akulutheo. Now, that doesn't mean anything to most people, but it does mean to follow, and it means to follow in close proximity with. So when we look at the idea of these 8 different occasions that Jesus used this word with his disciples, it really is that we need to keep in mind that this idea of following is not just a take it or leave it devotional, oh, I love Jesus, nice, warm, fuzzy feeling type of follow. It's predicated upon a command of Scripture, and he predicates it not as a devotional component. And I think that's why many Christians have a hard time just thinking about following Christ. Oh, I follow Christ. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. And that's not what we talk about when we talk about leader and follower relationships, because a leader has a role, a follower has a role. You see, that's what we forget.
Yes.
A leader has responsibility, a follower has responsibility. And I think that's what Jesus is getting across here with these commands. And that is that followers have responsibility. And your primary thing is to line up your life after me. And you follow me. And you stay in close proximity to me. And you do what I tell you to do. Because that's what followers do. And so this idea of follow me can't be lost in the the movie scripts. It can't be lost in the majestic music of, oh, Jesus, follow me. It can't be lost in all this mystical mumbo jumbo that we try to fill our lives with. It's just really grit your teeth, come on, and follow me. And be the follower that I've called you to be. So that, in essence, I think, really kind of boils down the whole follow me thing. And on top of the imperatives, Jesus gives us some specific teachings as well. And so with that said, we can look at those teachings the next time. But maybe that'll set the stage for the whole idea of what it means to follow Jesus.
Well, that's powerful. That is very powerful, Dr. Ricketson. I appreciate that lesson today and that teaching. Goodness. Look forward to next week.
I look forward to it too, John. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for your time.